And joining us now is LA Times columnist Gustavo Arellano. Gustavo, thank you so much for being with us. Your column today, the Cesar Chavez myth is punctured. It was a gut punch to so many who grew up seeing him as this folk hero. I'm one of those people. I grew up in New Mexico. So much of my early childhood education in the Southwest was intertwined with these lessons that we would receive lionizing this man. And it sounds like you had a very similar experience here in California, right?
I was a little bit different because my parents were Mexican immigrants. So when I was growing up, I thought Cesar Chavez, when I heard his name, I thought the boxer, Julio Cesar Chavez. My mother, she was a farm worker as a child up in Central California and then in Orange County, where I was born and raised. And she had no idea who Cesar Chavez was. But once I learned about him, I admired the man. I admired somebody who was out there working on behalf of one of the most exploited parts of the American economic system back in the 60s to this day, really since the beginning of this republic.
And you write in your column, some people will argue that it's unfair that he will likely get wiped away from the public sphere while other predatory men from the past and present largely maintain their riches and reputations. But that's looking at the abuse revelations the wrong way. I want to ask you, why do you say that?
Because right now, we need to center the voices of those who were abused, who suffered abuse under Chavez, whether it's those two women who were abused, and like 13, 14 years old, to Dolores Huerta, an icon of her own right and the longtime associate of Chavez. And so always start with that. Like right now, people do not. And also, by the way, the Cesar Chavez Foundation and the United Farm Workers, in their statements that came out the day before the New York Times article, that's who they were centering. Right now, it's not about protecting Cesar Chavez. Right now, it's not about reclamations or questions about why all of this is happening. I understand where that tendency is coming from, but right now we start with the survivors themselves. And you know, Dolores said that. One of them said to the New York Times, it's not about one man, it's the movement. We need to, como se dice, reacclimate ourselves to something that's how Cesar started. When he was part of the United Farm Workers and leading it, it was a movimiento, a movement. It wasn't adulation of one man. That was the mistake that his followers did in the years and decades that followed.
Yeah, and you're right to point that out and offer some criticism in your column today about those that often get distracted by the individual when it's all about the movement. And yet this movement was about giving voice to the people that were powerless. And there is there's just a hypocrisy to a lot of these allegations. How do you see the Latino community and the Chicano community reconciling the man with the movement going forward?
We're seeing this in real time. There's already movements in Bakersfield, which was supposed to name a street after Cesar Chavez. That's not going anywhere. In Fresno, which for years fought to get a street named after Cesar Chavez, and it was named, a council member who was part of the movement as a child says, we got to take that down. There's streets, schools, parks, community centers, student lounges named after Cesar. Every community that's there is going to have their moment. Some might keep it. Some might say, why try to erase history? Let's add context to it. Other people will say, no, we can't do that anymore. I think this is a moment. And yes, this does come at a time where a lot of Latinos do feel under attack from this administration. And it is sad to see one of the few Latinos who have national recognition in the civil rights stage have these accusations put against them, but to see the community and people calling out, again, first to center the survivors, then after that to figure out what's next. I think that shows a strength that a lot of people do not give Latinos credit for. But if 2025 showed anything, Latinos are stronger than ever before. We might not have the political power, but don't underestimate our righteousness, and don't underestimate our ability to interrogate ourselves in ways other Americans refuse to when it comes to other certain powerful men.
Yeah, quite the moment of introspection. I do want to ask this as a parent, though, right now. I mean, again, thinking of my education, thinking of all the elementary schools, many elementary schools that I know right now that are named after him. When it comes to education, especially here in the West, how is this going to affect the way children learn about the Chicano movement? I can already see textbooks in a way being rewritten, historic curriculum being changed here. And then again, you know, when you get into middle schools, when you get into high schools, there are age-appropriate conversations that you can have with children. But when it comes to farm workers' rights, that's something that's taught in the elementary schools. Where do those conversations even start?
I teach a Latinx history of Orange County course at Chapman University, my alma mater. And I get students from all over the country, not just from Orange County. And one of the things that I tell my students is I'm going to teach you about heroes and sheroes that have never made it into the textbooks and probably never will. And maybe those lessons will not stick to you forever because you're not from Orange County, but I guarantee you those types of people exist in your communities. I think it is imperative for especially K through 12 education to teach children about their local history. Yes, we do got to talk about the bigger histories involved, you know, in that. And that's where you do mention the United Farm Workers. That's when you do mention Cesar Chavez, because we cannot remove what he meant to so many people during his lifetime and afterwards. We do now, though, need to put into context who this person was. We need to have a full reckoning. We cannot run away from the sins of people like other Americans would like to do with some of our founding fathers, some of the people that that certain segments of the society insist did no wrong. Heroes do wrong. They are human beings. And the sooner we realize that, the better off we can be as Americans and the better off we can be considering all of our history, the true history.
Yeah, the true history that is dark, history that is messy, and yet it's the history of all of us. Gustavo, thank you so very much. Your column was incredible today. Thank you.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.